something I can do to get it on my account too?
Yeah, so, um, 1 second here. It takes a minute to. Okay, now I can go live. Okay, so I should be live on Instagram now. So if you want to
Okay, let
go
me
to my live,
refresh my Instagram. Yes, okay, I see you're live.
and then in the where you can make a comment, there should be a button saying request to join live.
Okay.
And
I see the thing that says
there should be like a camera with a plus button.
camera with a plus button.
Let's see here.
I'm not seeing it for some reason.
Okay.
Oh, share video? No?
No. I guess it won't let you.
It's fine if we don't. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, it's not a big deal because it's not like, I mean, you have like a ridiculous number of multiples of my followers, so it's probably fine this way.
All right,
I
yeah,
wouldn't sweat it.
this might have to be how we do it.
Let's do this. Let's just do this. That's totally fine. All good. So yeah,
And
hello
keep,
Instagram, I guess. We're live.
I'll keep the chat open, but maybe you should keep it open just to see chat
Yeah,
questions.
I'll just kind of have it on I have my phone like right in front of me here, so I'm just going to be able to hopefully see
Perfect.
everything as it comes in, chat wise. So that should be good.
Cool.
All right. I think we're good. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, Instagram.
Well, hello, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. What's
Yeah,
up?
we're on all the platforms. Wait, four platforms at the same time? That's a lot of platforms. So when I was streaming, I was never able to get the integration working that well. So you must be a pro at it by now.
All the platforms.
All the platforms. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we talked about what we were going to look at for this, and you mentioned wanting to go through some 3-bet pot stuff. Is that still something you want to talk about?
Yeah, I came across some spots this last tournament series Run Good where hey, you're welcome, Ryan Rob. Thanks for joining us. Where I was I actually forgot what the exact formation was. Basically, where I was in a 3-bet pot out of position, and just kind of trying to navigate those, like, has been a little bit of a struggle. And I would say it's anywhere, let's just say, like, from 40 to 80 big blinds. So we're like medium to deeper stacked in these spots.
Yeah.
Not where we have like no brainer jams, stuff like that. So
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Are we talking more like you're not sure about the pre-flop like range construction, or are we talking like once we get to the flop?
Once
now
we get to the flop, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. Okay. So I think a good sort of zone to practice for this obviously is about that 60 big blind region, because you mentioned 40 to 80, so we just go right in the middle. I've got 60 bigs here, chip EV pulled up. I guess the thing about adding ICM to the equation is much of the time when we're deep enough that we're sort of 50, 60 bigs, we're at the point where we're not really dealing with any significant ICM factors yet anyway. So I think it's probably pretty good to just look at some chip EV situations for now. And in particular, I think what's really cool about using GTO Wizard AI that we're going to be able to do is that we can actually set up a drill where we can tweak the pre-flop ranges to maybe reflect what's a little bit more representative of how the player pool is playing against a 3-bet. And then we can build a drill and build some trainer exercises off of that. So if that sounds good to you, then we can crack on with it.
Cool. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So I'm going to go with something like a hijack small blind formation, because it's kind of like an average sort of formation here where someone opens middle, we 3-bet small blind. And this is what the response is supposed to look like. Now, this is kind of a weird one because at 60 bigs with these sizings, it's like right in this territory where they're supposed to do some trapping with aces, kings, queens, etc. But they're also, it's kind of an awkward size to have non-all-in 4-bets. So you do see some weird stuff like this where it's got like a very specific jamming range and then like a tiny 4-bet range and a lot of calls. But I don't think people are actually going to play this way, right? I think people are going to have a pretty drastically different approach here. So what we're going to do is just go with a straightforward, what is it, fixed? That's the one. So this is one where we're just going to have a bunch of sizings allowed here. I'm not going to worry too much about the exact sizings. And we're going to tweak the pre-flop range, because I think at 60 bigs, probably not going to see a lot of people flatting aces at this depth. Probably not going to see ace king ever flatting. Probably not going to see kings flatting. Probably not seeing queens flat either. People don't like flatting queens. But by contrast, I don't think we're seeing jacks just rip for 60. I think jacks is going to flat a lot. I
Right.
think that we're seeing pairs basically always call. I don't think we're seeing any of this like random suited stuff. Don't think we're seeing like king, definitely not seeing like king 4 suited. Um, Really, I think a lot of players are just going to see like, they are basically just only 4-bet bluff with ace 5 suited. And then, maybe we can keep some of these suited aces at the fractions that they're at because there's slight reductions in frequency there. We can keep some of these ace queen, ace king, ace king, ace queen, king queen, ace jack in there. Get rid of that jack 8 suited. Actually, I'll just do that. This is probably a pretty straightforward, simple range to go with for now. Not really going to change it too much from here. So they're basically just, maybe they occasionally find a 4-bet bluff, but that's not going to be super important for this. We just want to have the kind of range that we need. Just going to give a random flop, and then we can build a drill from this. So we don't care about this exact spot right now. What we're going to do is go to practice this spot. And the shortcut here for building a drill where we can practice a specific betting line over multiple streets is just to delete the flop. Just delete the flop texture. And now it's going to, on the fly, solve each spot for us in kind of a custom way, which is really cool. And I'm going to just give it any hand that's in our range. We're going to play the full hand just to make sure it's maximally challenging. And we'll just hit start training. So we're going to, I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit just so everybody can see a little better.
Oh, yeah. Okay, wait, I'm going to zoom out then because I just zoomed in.
Oh,
no, that's perfect.
I'm zooming in at the same time. We're doing like a, what's it called? A dolly zoom. We're like,
yeah.
I'm zooming in and you're zooming out. All right.
All right.
So
perfect.
first
I think
spot.
It's big enough. All right.
Okay. First spot, we have queen 9-6, 2 spades. Talk me through, before we consider the fact that we have ace queen off here, talk me through how you're kind of evaluating a spot like this when you just arrive at the flop and you see what the flop is.
Okay, so we got 3-bet and we called. Is that what's
No, sorry, we 3-bet them and
oh, we're in the
and they called.
We're in the small blind.
We're the small blind. Yeah.
Okay, my bad.
Sorry,
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that I didn't misunderstand you, right? You did want to look at when we're the 3-better?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is the right spot, yeah.
Yes, and sorry, I was tweaking my settings here. Okay.
Oh, no worries.
I think hopefully the chat can see everything. Hey, thanks, Plato. Glad you're here. So yes, so how I'm approaching these spots. So being in the small blind, we are gonna have a fair amount of hands that like aren't nutted, so to speak, in this spot, right? Like we're incentivized to 3-bet
sure.
quite a bit here. So on these types of textures, our opponent therefore should be calling with a lot of hands here if they're calling correctly. So on queen 9-6 two-tone, like this interacts with both of our ranges. So exploitatively, my first thoughts were, well, we have value, so we should just start putting money in the pot because like exploitatively, whether we have a bluff or value here, I mean, I think it doesn't matter because we can just they're not going to recognize those things. It's like
sure.
We're only just betting when we have value is what I'm trying to say. So
yeah.
So I think it's obviously player dependent, but here we're at the top of our range, and I think our opponent has quite a few continues. But I know on these queen high two-tone textures, is our bet sizing going to be different based on other textures in this spot?
So I think nothing that you said there is incorrect, obviously. I think the tricky thing about constructing strategies in these out of position spots is there's a balance between simplicity and effectiveness in that in an ideal world the most complex strategy against a weak opponent is going to be the most effective. But the problem is that the earlier we are in the game tree, the earlier the street that we're on, the more a complex strategy starts to lead us into turn and river situations where, for example, we sometimes end up in a line where we just never have a bluff or we never have value or something like that, right? So I think the danger about the approach of sort of shifting early in the hand to being kind of value heavy is that a lot of the spots where we do that are situations where it then leads to a subsequent spot on a later street where our opponent's actually going to be drastically over folding. And then conversely, the situations where we maybe don't take that sort of value heavy line. So let's say we have pocket jacks and we check this flop because we have second pair, right? That line where maybe it goes check, check, or it goes check, bet, call, or something like that, that might actually be a line that's very favorable for us to be able to get more value simply because our opponent perceives our range to be a lot more capped than it actually is.
Right.
So I tend to like looking at the earlier streets, particularly in 3-bet pots where it can be quite difficult to figure out exactly what the ratio of one hand to another is in our range and our opponent's range. I tend to like keeping it relatively simple. And by that, I mean in these out of position situations, I think it really boils down to a couple of different types of spots. I think we have situations where we want to play all 3 streets because it's a very static flop texture. And usually those are going to be board textures where we're going to use very small sizes, which is why I have the 20% size in our game tree here. Okay. Then we've got situations where we want to play basically 2 streets, which is why I have a 2E size in our structure here, which is that 77%. There are going to be occasional situations where we want to play just 1 street, and you will find that there are some 3-bet pot situations where the best size is just jam out of position. Particularly that happens on like Jack 10x. Jack 10x flush draw is like the classic spot for just rip the flop for 3x pot or something. And then you've got the occasional spot that kind of comes a bit in between those, where something like that 43, 40-ish%, 50% kind of size might be pretty good. And I think generally I like to look at these spots as with my top of my range, how many streets am I going to want to play on this board texture? And on this spot, or in this board rather, if we think about top of our range, well, top of our range here really in any 3-bet pot is mostly going to be our aces and kings. So when we have aces or kings here, how many streets do we think we want to play in this spot? Because that's going to lead us to what our size should be. What do you think is going to be the right way to go here? Just based on the texture.
Yeah, probably like 2 streets.
Yeah, I think 2 is good. I think the reason why 2 is good specifically is because there's going to be a lot of turn cards here that, even though they don't make our aces or kings like shrivel up in terms of value, there's going to be a lot of turn cards that allow for villain to have a bunch of like pair plus open ender, pair plus gut shot, pair plus flush draw, all that stuff, right? And that kind of implies that there's a good amount of benefit from being able to bet flop big, shove turn, right?
Yeah.
And that means we are kind of leaning towards wanting to play 2 streets with our value region.
Right.
And if we're playing 2 streets with our value region, problem with that is that, of course, there's some hands in our range that don't want to just be all in across 2 streets, right? We have plenty of hands here that are like really not wanting to be forced to bet big on this flop.
Right.
Can you think of an example of a hand that's like, we really hate betting with this hand on this flop?
Like a value hand?
Or just any hand that if I give you that hand, you really don't like betting big with it.
Don't like betting big with like jacks, maybe.
Yeah, jacks is a great example. Tens also.
Tens,
also
jacks.
Like the hand that I was really, sorry?
Ace king?
Yeah, kinda. Yeah, I mean, ace king maybe with a spade we don't mind so much, but like ace king of clubs, like we kind of hate having to bet big.
Yeah.
And then also I was thinking of like ace 9, right? If we have like ace 9 of diamonds, it really sucks to bet big because we have middle pair, which is exactly the kind of hand that really doesn't like betting big in a lot of spots. We don't have any kind of backdoor draw. So what we end up with is we have quite a few value hands, or we have hands that prioritize betting big here. But we also, once we've decided that that's the size that these value hands want to go with, we have plenty of hands that don't want to bet big. So this kind of forces us into picking a strategy where we have some hands that bet big and some hands that check. Because we don't really want to have like big bets and small bets and checks, because that just gets really complicated. So if we've got big bets and checks here, we want to think from that point about how does each hand fit into those ranges. And when we have ace queen, I think it's pretty clear that ace queen is strong enough that we're happy to play this as a value hand here.
Yeah.
But I think there's an interesting question that surrounds having the ace of spades. Mm-hmm. Do we feel like having the ace of spades makes us more likely to want to bet or more likely to want to check?
Yeah, so I was just kind of going over some of these spots, and I was a little bit surprised that the solver did the opposite of what I thought it would do, based on the fact that you have that specific card. So yeah, so I kind of been thrown off by that a little bit.
Yeah, it can be really confusing. There are certainly going to be spots where you expect like, oh, ace of spades equals good, but then there's some situations where it's not that the ace of spades makes it worse, it's just that the ace of spades now kind of means that our hand plays really well as a check because it never has to like be concerned about a spade, right? It allows us to, yeah, here's a good way to look at it. If we always bet the ace of spades, if we bet every single hand that includes the ace of spades, then we can never have the nut flush in certain instances, right?
Right.
And that's a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
So we want to try to at least find some hands that have the ace of spades that might check. But would we rather check an ace of spades hand that already has some showdown value and can, maybe value bet the future streets, or would we rather check an ace of spades that doesn't have any showdown value and really hates to face a bet? Well, pretty clear that we would rather just bluff with the ace of spades that doesn't have a pair and just check with some of the ace of spades hands that do. Because now when we check the ace of spades with a queen, we know that nothing's ever going to make us fold. Pocket aces with the ace of spades, we know that nothing's ever going to make us fold, right?
Right.
So it can be a little bit counterintuitive there. So
yeah,
I would probably say, if you put me on the spot here, obviously these spots with 4 sizings, these mixed spots, like I don't know exactly what sizing the solver's going to go with in terms of what's best.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to build a strategy that has, a single size and it has a coherent range, I would think big bet or check functions pretty well.
Yeah.
And I would also think that specifically as part of that checking range, this exact hand might function pretty well. But it ultimately isn't going to matter that much because this hand is clearly going to make a lot of money pretty much no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just take a look. Let's see if we check and see what it says. Oh, it checks 3% of the time. Okay, so it does check sometimes. Let me just check the actual strategy for that node. Okay, let's play the rest of this hand, then we'll go back and check it.
Sure.
All right, so we face like 40% or so. Are we considering check raising, or do we want to just check call?
Just because of the texture, is the correct line of thinking, would it be correct to think our hand would want to raise to protect and get value now?
I think that getting value is certainly a really good reason to raise. I think when we come to think about protection,
or equity denial.
Yeah, I guess that's where I was going, is that the protection is a thing, but it's most relevant when we can kind of have the benefit of getting our opponent to occasionally fold some hands that are very live against our current hand, that are drawing very live.
Yeah.
Now, with that being a priority here, I think we get to a situation where if we were to check jam, then we might have the benefit of getting villain to fold hands like maybe Jack 10, which is very live against this hand.
Yeah.
Plus, we'd also, they probably still call King Queen. So check jamming, I think, could be pretty viable here. I think the tricky part about a smaller check raise is that in practice, I feel like a lot of hands like flush draws and Jack 10 are not going to fold to a smaller check raise. And so it does kind of mean that we aren't really denying any equity, and we're also creating a spot where a hand like a queen might somehow find a way to get away from it on the next street regardless. So I would probably say that if we're going to check raise, I kind of like just check jamming here. I think that kind of works pretty well. But having that ace of spades, I think just makes this a really nice check calling hand. And I think that it's nice to have hands here that have a spade in them and just don't care about what happens when the turn's a spade, because we're just never going to fold it. So
Yeah.
I would probably check call here.
Yeah. With
Yeah,
the
solver
ace
does want
of
to check call.
spades specifically, because we're never folding any spade turn, no matter what it is.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we didn't have the ace of spades, we would have much more need for protection, specifically because there's so many more bad runouts, right? Like
Yeah.
if we had ace queen with the ace of clubs, now a spade turn is really problematic because we may not, our hand is just a pure bluff catcher now, and it's not even like a particularly good one when we
Yeah.
don't have a spade. But at this point, our hand it's stronger than a bluff catcher because it can improve to beat value, and it's clearly a very good bluff catcher. So we do check call. I don't expect this is going to be a spot where we need to have any donks on the turn. It's a bit too complex to try that, so let's
Yeah.
just not bother. Let's
Yeah.
just check everything. Villain bets small, which is kind of handy. Ever doing anything except call here?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to call. I think
Yeah.
you do see what you. Sorry, I don't think there's any reason to not call.
Right.
What you do see sometimes is people will like, for lack of a better phrase, people call it like the spaz jam. They just like panic jam. They just like they have the top pair plus the nut flush draw, and they really don't know what they're going to do on the river if they check call and then they face a bet. So they just jam, and then every single better hand calls, and every single worse hand folds, and that's kind of a disaster, obviously. Solver, that's funny. Solver actually, I think, wants to probably raise for value there, so that's kind of interesting. But in practice, I don't think we should raise.
Yeah.
Ooh, River Queen, that's interesting. What do you like here? Are we ever donking this river? What do you think?
Man, I don't know. It's tough to say. It's tough to say what the solver would want to do here.
Well, let's think about it in terms of, anytime we're going to. Okay. So it says someone said it in chat. Any way to move the video bar to the top of the screen?
Yeah.
Hard to see the board on Instagram.
Yeah. I did move it up.
Okay.
I did think about a way to fix this, but it would require. Actually, no, that won't work. Never mind. I can't. Yeah. Well, anyway, I did move it up top. I just know it's a little hard to see, but I tried to fix it for them.
Well, you might be able to you could probably move our video window just like over so it's like right next to the board, maybe.
Can I?
Like, so it's over the top of Chrome. If you're just doing a display capture, you might be able to do that. Oh wait, no, you're not. I forgot. You're not. You're viewing it within Zoom. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you can just like, because there's a big black space between the bet 40 and the edge of the window.
Yeah.
Maybe you can close that up, because I think there's like a drag bar there on Zoom in the middle.
In the middle.
This middle center, like right on this side here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just had it. Yeah, there's the drag bar. Oh, okay, so it keeps the same size.
Yeah.
Oh, that's annoying. Yeah,
I know it's tough to see on Instagram. Yeah, in the future, we could maybe finesse a little bit.
We'll have to figure out we'll have to do this with more than 15 minutes prep time before we.
I think I have some ideas on how to make it better next time as far as visibility.
Okay.
But so we're blocking most flushes that call a 3-bet pre by holding the ace of spades. Is that true? Because I used to think that, but like villain's calling range there on the button is going to contain more than just suited aces, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I would say we're blocking some. I wouldn't necessarily say we're blocking most.
Yeah,
I think villain is.
I don't think
villain
we're blocking
is still going to
most.
have King Jack, King 10, King 9, Jack 10, Jack 9, 9 8, 8 7, 7 6, or 6.
Yeah.
The 6 is out there, but like there's still probably 10 to 12 combos of flushes out there. So I think we're blocking some. I don't think we're blocking enough that it matters like a massive amount. But it is obviously meaningful.
Of course.
I think the question here becomes, if we're going to have donk bets, it has to be because the board changed in a meaningful way that allows us to now have more nut hands than villain does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the problem is that even though the nuts technically just changed in the sense that the board paired and now full houses are the nuts, the problem is we basically never have a full house here. We probably wouldn't play check call with top set or middle set very often, and we obviously never have 6s or deuces really. So and we certainly never have queen six. We may have two combos of queen nine suited sometimes, but probably not.
Yeah.
So I think in the end, even though we improve to a queen sometimes, villain still has probably more flushes. So I wouldn't think, I mean, it's possible that there might be like a weird amount of donk betting here, but I would think we probably just check. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, 100% check with this
Dave,
hand.
Dave on yeah. Okay, he shoves. So then now we just have a easy call.
Yep, 100% call.
So he has the jack nine, yeah. So Dave on Instagram said, feels like a check call, leave bluffs in. So yeah, I mean, as our opponent's like gonna turn some hands like 8-7 suited, jack 10, maybe king jack into bluffs there on the river.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of if we just pull up the actual sim here, first of all, I want to show why the solver actually prefers basically just range betting for a sort of medium size on the flop. You can see it's high frequency, basically range bet here. There is some big betting, but it actually prefers the sort of medium-ish sizes. And I would guess that's just because villain's range has so many pocket pairs that are going to have tough decisions against those bets. So that's probably what's going on. But if we do check and then villain finds this bet and we call, this is, reasonable range here. Ace queen, you can see we're basically always check raising ace queen without the ace of spades, but with the ace of spades, we are check calling. So we got that one right. We were right about that one. Then deuce of spades turn, we check, villain bets 9, we call, river, I don't think we have donks here. Yeah, no donk bets at all. Pretty straightforward river. And then villain's bluffs on this river, they're supposed to be...
Yeah.
This is the way I like to look at finding the bluffs here. You just go to trash hands and you just highlight it, and you see like what's the stuff that's supposed to be betting. So trash hands that bet all in. 5-4, you're supposed to just blast it off with 5 high. 4s with a spade, 3s with a spade.
Yeah, the 8-7's in there.
The 8-7's in there, yeah. I mean, 8-7 actually makes some sense at least because they flopped a draw. 10-8, king 10, some ace 10. Like, there's a lot of stuff here that people just never find. Like, nobody finds the ace 10 of clubs triple off here. This is just, like, insane. Nobody finds that. So this is a good example of a spot where it's probably pretty likely to be an under-bluffed line. But at the same time, if you look at the value region, they're supposed to, like, go 3 streets for value here with, like, jacks sometimes, which is super thin, and people don't do that either, So there's a lot of stuff that goes on which is sort of contrary to what's supposed to happen. It's like people don't bluff enough, but they also don't value bet enough. So in the end, it kind of actually becomes a bit more close. But anyway, interesting spot.
Yeah, that was a great one. Yeah, it's a good one.
Cool. So next one, we have ace queen again. This is just the day of ace queen today. We get king jack 4. What are you thinking about this board? How would you evaluate this one?
Okay. Okay, so like in general, bit better for our 3-betting range. Of course, there's some draws. It's a somewhat dynamic board, I would say, but I think this board lends us to like find more triple barrel spots, maybe.
Possibly, but
I mean, I don't know.
I think the way that I would look at it is that every board is a board where we can have a roughly equal amount of triple barrel spots, simply because there's thousands of different turn river combinations that we're going to have to find triple barrels on most of them, and so it's not so much that this becomes a board where we're immediately thinking about tripling more.
Okay.
It's more just that this is a board that's really favorable for our 3-bet range, simply because aces, kings, and ace king are all really strong here. We have pocket jacks. We have a lot of king jack. We might even have a shred of king 4 suited here. And ultimately, villain is just going to have a lot of pocket pairs. And this is kind of a fun, like, I don't want to say cheat code necessarily, but it's like a nice way to figure out what the range bet spots are in some of these situations. It's because villain's range is always, when they call a 3-bet, they're always going to be very dense to like 10s and below. So any board where 10s and below is not very strong is usually going to be a board where range betting will probably function okay. So on the previous board, I didn't quite immediately recognize that it was a range bet because I thought, well, it's queen 9-6 instead of like queen jack 6. But king jack 4 certainly is way different and way better for us than king 6-4, right? Because king 6-4, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, jacks are all reasonably strong, but king jack 4 very different. So I think we can just range bet here. I think we can range bet like 20% or 43. I don't think it's gonna be too much of a sweat here. Let's go 43. Okay, it's fine with betting. So we do bet. Oh, okay, jack of hearts. How would you evaluate this turn card?
In general, is this a card we would check back? When the middling card pairs, is that a general idea?
It's certainly a card that is more favorable in terms of there are hands in their range that improve to make a strong hand that beats some of our value range, right? Because if we have aces, we have ace king, we now lose to a jack, right? So clearly there's some portion of our range that just got worse. But we did range bet the flop, so we still have a jack sometimes. And we always have to kind of be aware that villain has plenty of hands that are not just a jack. So that kind of has to factor into it as well. So it's not a great card for us, but it's also important that we don't look at it and just automatically like snap, slow down, and never bluff, right? We've got to be real careful about that.
Sure.
So let's talk about, first of all, if we were gonna, let's say, use I guess the geometric size here would be this 43%, so we'd be betting 15 into 35 and then shoving river. So let's say we were to use that size, for example, here. What do you think would be some hands that might make sense to bluff with?
I mean, is it correct to say our intuitive bluffs would be like our flush draws and then our turned backdoor flush draws and like our straight draws? And like, I think ace queen specifically of diamonds on this texture probably take it as a bluff. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're on the right lines in terms of this when we're out of position on like a double flush draw board like this. A lot of our bluffs actually become somewhat simple in the sense that we're out of position, so we're naturally going to be bluffing with a more linear range construction. We're going to have bluffs that have some amount of equity to improve, as opposed to just like absolute airball bluffs that we might have when we're in position.
Right.
And the hardest part about bluffing with any hand here that specifically not only has doesn't have a heart or a spade in it, but specifically we have one of the exact types of hands that we would want our opponent to have in order for them to fold the turn.
Okay.
It becomes more problematic, right? Because if you switch our hand to ace of hearts, queen of spades, or vice versa, it becomes like, yeah, we can just bluff here because we get so many more folds. But with two diamonds in our hand and just a raw gut shot, it's really awkward. Because, I mean, even when we make the gut shot on the river, 2 out of those 4 10s that complete us on the river also complete a flush.
Mm-hmm.
And that just makes life really awkward. So I think it's probably just fine to go ahead and check here. Solver checks sometimes, doesn't check that often. Interesting. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it goes check, check. What do we have here in terms of thoughts?
I think our hand is a really, really good bluff catcher now at this point.
Okay.
I guess.
In terms of, like, so what does that imply that we're just checking, basically?
I mean, yeah, I guess that's what I was saying. However, I will say, I do find a lot of spots to miss value. So, like, but like, what are we targeting? Like 9s, 10s? Like, we lose to any king X, any jack X, any backdoor heart. So, like, I don't know.
Sure. Okay. I think the question becomes, if we were to value bet, what sizing do you think we would be able to use, or we would need to use?
Yeah. I think like a blocker bet functions maybe pretty nice in this spot.
Yeah. I think ultimately the only size that really makes any substantial sense here is a block size, because that's the only size that really allows us to actually expect to get called by any significant amount of worse hands. So a worse queen, which obviously there's only a few of them out there. We've got stuff like 9s and 10s, like you mentioned. Those hands certainly, if we do block for this 26% size, 9s and 10s at least have to think about calling, because they're getting such a really good price. I think that it's close between blocking and checking. I think that if the river was the queen of clubs, I think it would be a lot less close. I think we would kind of have almost a mandatory bet, maybe even for like the 40% size. But I think probably here, we probably have either a block or a check. Let's go block. Okay, yeah, block is good. Block is fine. And villain just folds. Okay. So we got that one pretty accurate. Cool. I can see a few people in the chat posting comments. I saw you pinned a comment. I want to point out to everybody.
Oh yeah, please go for it.
Yes, I'm gonna do my little sales pitch.
Yes,
now.
Please do.
If you, I know you've probably been like frantically kind of trying to deal with the stream and everything.
I
am. The alliance for this summer, I know you guys might have seen some stuff on my Instagram about it. If you are unfamiliar with it, what it is basically a 10-week sort of training camp style project this summer for players of all kinds of backgrounds. It's designed to get people fully prepared for WSOP and to take them through the entire WSOP experience with a team behind them that can be supporting them throughout the summer and can also provide continuous feedback, opportunity to prepare before final tables, before day 2s, all sorts of things like that. We've got a 2-week period of coaching sessions prior to the beginning of the series. That starts on May 12th. We're calling it the Alliance Pro Prep Series. We have 20 hours of coaching sessions from a variety of different contributors. We've got everything from high roller crusher like Sam Laskowitz doing a coaching session with us. We've got contributions from people like WSOP legend Steve Zolotow is going to be doing a mixed games Q&A. We've got sessions on mindset, behavior and tells, health and fitness stuff, all sorts of things to get everybody prepped for WSOP. Then, of course, we all go out and win a bunch of bracelets, and then we have a week of reflection at the end. And on top of that, for everybody that's in this live stream, if you guys want to go and sign up, if you use the discount code PokerfaceAsh, you will get 30% off. Woo! I decided to be real generous.
Woohoo!
Real generous. Give all of Ash's followers 30% off.
Let's go!
Go out there and use that code.
Nice.
Don't spread that code around. It's going to cost me too much money if you guys spread that code around, all right? So you guys go sign up and then don't tell anybody else. Nah, I'm kidding. Tell everybody. Whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, that's my sales pitch for this little...
Cool, yeah. And I put the link in my bio.
Give you a little bit of a break.
Yeah, no, I was trying to figure out a way. I think it's best if I just don't put our faces on the Instagram one, just so they can see the board better, or the thing. And then on YouTube, they can see it. Otherwise, I'm scared to like touch anything and mess it up. Actually, wait.
Yeah,
I have an idea. I have an idea. Wait a second. Okay. I have an idea. Oh, shoot.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry, keep going. I'm going to mess with this for one more second.
Oh, I mean, I was mostly done. I was just going to say next time we do this, we'll have to make sure we figure out a smarter way to do this, but that's fine. It's all good.
I mean...
I'm glad everybody's getting some value in the chat. I'm glad everybody's out here, happily enjoying the study session. And hopefully, this is the kind of thing that's going to be really useful for going into this summer as well. Because with this drill, we've set it up so that we're studying basically against a range that's realistic. We're studying against a range that represents the type of range that people actually are flatting 3-bets with in a lot of these spots. So this is a good sort of barometer here for how we want to be approaching some of these situations in a lot of these spots against real opponents.
Yeah.
I got my phone in front of me. I see everything jumping around. I see the screen jumping around.
I tried. It's all good.
It's all good. Don't sweat it too much. I think we'll be good. We'll be good.
Yeah.
Why don't we'll go through this hand and then we'll wrap things up, because I know we've gone through a lot of concepts and I know you've been trying to juggle everything at once. So we'll do one more hand and then we'll call it a night. How about that?
All right. Sounds good.
All right. So King 5 Deuce. Talk me through this flop. How would you evaluate this one? How do you look at this kind of board?
Yeah, kind of same concept as before, because it's a king high. It is a king high board. It is two-tone. But maybe there's some like not so great turn cards that can come. Like if they stay like low and connected, but overall, king high two tone. We just get to pretty much range bet this flop, I'd say.
Yeah, I think so. I think range bet here is fine. I think a really good shorthand for when we can range bet as well, alongside the whole concept that I just mentioned about the pocket pairs, is can our opponent ever have two pair? And in this spot, they have 0 two pairs, right? They're not flatting king 5 suited, king deuce suited, or 5 deuce suited pre, and they're obviously not flatting any of the offsuit either. So anytime our opponent can never have two pair, it's immediately going to be a better situation for us. They have more just random missed air hands and so on. So I think range betting is going to be fine. We probably could justify range betting the 43 here, but I'm just going to go 20. Oh, wow, it doesn't even want to do that. Okay. Why does it not want to do that? Let's see. Oh, it just wants to go bigger. In fact, this is such a good spot that it actually allows us to range bet like larger. So I'm going to try to go back and like replay that hand. Play from here. There we go. Let's do this. So yeah, it wants to range bet slightly larger because it's just such a good spot. 6 of spades turn. Okay.
This is kind of one of those like not so great turn cards I was talking about, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's not such a great turn card in the sense that at least a certain portion of our range gets worse, right? Our aces, kings, those types of hands, without a spade, it's now a little bit more difficult to think about playing for stacks with them. But we always have to consider that, first of all, the SPR is still really low. So, there's only so many bad things that can actually happen when we're at just over a 1 SPR, right? The other thing is that in the same way that our opponent has flushes, maybe occasional sets, maybe occasional like 6-5 or something here, we also have some of those hands, right? We have occasional 6-5, we have occasional king 6 suited, king 5 suited as a 3-bet. We have, ace king, ace of spades, pocket kings. We have strong hands too. So it's an unfavorable card in the sense that it changes the board, but it doesn't necessarily have to be super unfavorable for our overall range, basically. And kind of like some of the spots that we looked at before, we do actually have some, at least somewhat intuitive bluffs that we can pick here from out of position, because it really comes down to anything that has like a decent spade is going to be a relatively good bluffing candidate. And then we also have stuff like the ace 3s, the ace 4s, the 7-8s, stuff like that has just picked up a gut shot, right? Stuff that has some kind of equity might be okay here. Jack 10 of clubs, though, probably pretty safe to say this would be not a great bluff.
Dusty.
You agree with that one?
Dusty bluff.
Pretty dusty, yeah. 92% check, so very reasonable. And now we just fold.
Yeah, so, now we just have an easy fold. Cool.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll do one more.
Yeah, sounds good. But we can go as long as you want. I'm chilling.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, if it's not hard work for you.
Oh, no. I get a little OCD about trying to make things perfect, and we're good.
I'm exactly the same way. Don't worry about it.
We've talked about this.
Yeah, exactly. So 10-7-6 is the next one. This is obviously a very different kind of a board texture.
Yeah.
Thinking about it through the lens of how many streets we want to play here, what do you think is the answer on this board? How many streets do you want to play?
It would kind of the same as the very beginning, where it's like maybe 2 streets. Yeah,
I think so. I think that people are a bit more inclined to play these types of boards a bit more passively than they really should in 3-bet pots, because they don't necessarily recognize that with the SPR being like less than 3 or like 2.5-ish, there's not that many bad things that can really happen. I think that if we were 200, 300 big blinds deep, this would be a really annoying board for our 3-bet range, because we would have to play it a lot more cautiously. But at this depth, first of all, we do have some 7-6 and stuff like that in our range. We do have 10s. We might have 7s sometimes. There's hands in our range here that are strong on this board. But on the other hand, we also can still quite easily just bet big on flop with an overpair and, call a shove, or, bet big on flop, shove turn on a brick, things like that. It's really only the 4 to a straight turns, or the really, the turns that really alter the board substantially, that we're particularly concerned about. We're not really that concerned here compared to if it was maybe something like a. Well, actually, I can't even think of that many boards that we'd be super concerned about.
Like 3 to a straight boards, maybe? Like
well,
10, 9,
I guess
8?
This is 3 to a straight, but it's like, yeah, 10, 9, 8 was the only one I was thinking of. But even then, like, we have queen jack, we have tens, we have nines, we have eights, you know.
Yeah.
So there's just, I think what it comes down to is just low SPR. Like, there's just not that many really scary boards. It's just a question of how wide can we get the money in, you know, and how many streets are we going to get the money in across. So in this case, I think 2 streets is good. I think we do probably want to have some checks here. I think we have some like 10x that wants to check. I think we have some 7x that wants to check, some 8s, 9s, some... Here's an interesting thought. What do you do here with ace king of spades?
Okay. I think, so in the past, I think we've kind of talked about something slightly similar, maybe different board texture, but when we have the nut flush draw, like a hand like specifically ace king out of position, we can actually check call with it and maybe check raise with it at some frequency, but we prefer to check call with it.
Yeah, I think you're along the right lines. I think what it comes down to is that if we're going to bet big here, a hand like ace king of spades, when we bet that hand, clearly we have tons of equity. It's not that it's not a good hand. Right. It's that when we bet that hand for a big size, we don't really get a lot of one pair to fold, but we do fold out most of the worst ace high and all of the worst king high.
Yeah.
And that becomes a bit of a problem because now our hand just went down in equity, and that's not what we want. We don't want to play ace king of spades against a range that only includes one pair or better. We want to play ace king of spades against a range that includes a bunch of worse ace highs and worse king highs.
Right.
So I would bet, I'm not 100%, but I would be more confident than not that if we check what the solver's doing here, it's probably checking ace king of spades, but we'll see. What do we think about this jack 8 of diamonds specifically here?
I initially thought that it was a good hand to bluff with. However, I don't know with the spades and us having the diamonds with no back doors, but maybe that makes it even better of a candidate to barrel with because we have a gutter, we have jack high, so like no showdown value. We have some equity, but maybe it's just not enough. But I thought like we also block some 10x with the jack. I don't know. That was my initial thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's certainly merit to that. I think this is going to be one where it's probably pretty close. Let's bet with it just for fun. Okay, no, Solver doesn't want to bet it. Okay, so we bet with it, but Solver says no, never mind. But we ended up here. Now we bet with it, and we get a 10 turn. What do we... Yeah, this is an interesting one. What do we think about this turn card here? What would we want to... Well, I think this hand is probably too weak to bluff here, but what kind of bluffs or what kind of strategy do we think we would want to have on this turn?
So I think in general, like no matter if we have aces or a bluff here, I think we're checking when the top card pairs more.
I think that you're thinking along the right lines in that you're recognizing that this is a not a great card for our range, in that villain has a lot of 10x when they call a big bet on the flop. But it's also, again, a spot where flop SPR is so low, or the SPR at this point is so low, that our aces, our kings, I think they can, you know, maybe like even bet 20%, you know, bet the small size here and shove the river. Because when we check, obviously villain's going to have a lot of hands that just check back, and that's going to cause us to lose value from some of that portion of our range. So it wouldn't completely shock me here if there's a certain amount of this 20% being used just as our value bet range. But I think this hand is going to want to check, 92%. And now we just fold it. Oh, but it doesn't want to fold? What the heck? Okay, that's a weird one. All right, we got to look at this one. That's a super weird one. So first of all, I'm curious what it wants to do on the flop. It might just want to check this hand on the flop. Let's see. So flop, okay. Oh, wow. So flop is actually, okay, so it doesn't mind the bigger size. Flop is pretty close to like a medium size highish frequency. That's a little surprising. It's a little bit better of a flop than I would have expected. I thought this would have been a little bit worse for us, but it's probably just a function of us having like all of this in here. Like we have all this 10x, which is pretty good, and we obviously have all the overpairs too. So that might be what's causing that. But Jack 8, you know, Jack 8 of spades, Jack 8 of the other suits is actually mostly betting. That's surprising. Very surprising. Anyway, we do bet. Villain calls, turn 10. Let's see. Oh, wow. Okay. So there is some small betting, but there's also some big betting. That's surprising. So it looks like the SPR is so low that the solver just doesn't care. Solver just doesn't care about getting stacked by a 10. Okay. Solver is like, I have jacks. I want to make sure that I get stacks against, like nines. You know, it's just jamming jacks to get called by nines, jamming jacks to get called by ace 7, jamming jacks to get called by even like ace queen of hearts at a tiny frequency. That's wild. 6-5, like 6-5 just has to call sometimes here. So these low SPR spots are kind of crazy. It just comes down to like, not only are we not afraid to value bet with aces and kings here when there's a 10 out there because of how low the SPR is, but we're actually happy to, you know, jam some hands, and certainly the small size can happen, but it's not even that necessary for us to size down because we're just getting such a good price at this point that the fact that we sometimes just lose to a 10 is just not even that important. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things about low SPR spots that are really tricky, because sometimes we just have to be okay with the idea of just getting stacked by a 10 at a pretty high rate here.
Yeah.
And that's not easy, right? It sucks to just like jam kings here and just be like, oh, well, I got snapped by Jack 10 and I just busted, you know, but that's how the solver likes to play. So interesting part of the equation there for sure.
Jersey Boy on YouTube says, humans aren't calling these hands on the turn though, are they? Unless they're playing Tritons.
I mean, humans are going to make decisions there based on a lot of like spontaneous stuff. So like, I think the average human player there, when they get to the turn with bluff catchers, like if they get to the turn with pocket nines, I think a lot of humans will call nines there, not just because they have the gut shot, but also because they see you shove on a 10 turn, and they're like, why would you shove with a 10? I call. They just put you on ace king.
Yes.
You know, they're just like, everyone always has ace king all the time in their eyes, you know?
It's so true.
Right. And then on the flip side, you've got other humans who are like, you shoved when the turn paired the 10, therefore you must have a 10, right? And the problem is it's incredibly difficult to know the difference between these two completely opposing types of players. And this is the whole point of studying GTO. It's that we have a baseline of where we can adapt. And once we have enough information that we know that XYZ player is the type to just always fold pocket nines here, it's like, oh, okay, we're going to bluff a lot against this guy. And then, you know, the other player, ABC player, is I'm just calling nines here every time. Well, that guy, you know, maybe we play closer to optimal because he's supposed to call nines. So, you know, he's not making a mistake by doing that. He's playing correctly, you know? Yeah. So that's kind of the usefulness here. And it's definitely a common question. And there's tons of spots where humans are playing way far away from the solver. But if you don't know how you're supposed to play, you can't really adapt at all. You know, you're just kind of guessing. Right,
exactly. All right, let me see here. How many likes do we have? All right, we have 10 likes on YouTube. Give us 5 more likes and Matt will continue. We need some more likes though.
5 more likes, okay. I got to get all these YouTube tactics down. I got to like learn how to like ask people for likes and subscribes and everything. Like, I got to exchange poker coaching for YouTube coaching from you.
Yeah. And then hit the like button on the live on Instagram if that's a thing. I don't know if it's a thing, honestly. But give us some more likes on YouTube and we'll continue going. But show the stream some love and we'll do another hand here.
Yes, please, guys. All right, one more hand. How about this one?
All right.
So this time we actually, so we've already kind of got the answer here. We'll skip the flop here because the solver's telling us like it really likes the 43%. I think what's happening is there's a lot of spots here where Villain's range is, because Villain doesn't have like aces and kings pre like they're supposed to, their range is a lot less protected, which means that it's so much weaker on most flops that the spots that would normally be like small range bets become like half pot range bets because they're just so favorable for our range, and villain's
Right.
range is just too weak. So,
I think I kind of forget that it's okay to use those sizings out of position.
mhm,
Like the other day when I posted that hand on my hand history and you're like, "Oh, you can actually go super big here." I think I
yeah,
often get confused thinking, "Oh, I'm out of position. I can't go big," but that's just like
mhm.
not true when we have like these types of hands.
Yeah, something that people I think aren't really kind of aware of is that if you take a polarized range and a condensed range, so you take a range that's strong hands and bad hands, and then a range that's only bluff catchers, at a certain point, position is completely irrelevant. The strategy will look exactly the same because a polarized range only has incentive to either value bet or bluff, and a bluff catching range has no incentive to bet no matter whether it's in position or out. So if you take a perfectly polarized range and a perfectly condensed range, position is irrelevant. And it's only when ranges start to become more complicated and SPR starts to get higher and things like that, that position starts to become more and more and more relevant. So in fact, when we have a significantly stronger range or a significantly more polarized range than our opponent, even when we're out of position, we can still play really aggressively. And that's why so many of these three bet pot scenarios, even from out of position, it's why so many of them are coming out as range bets. It's because we have so much stronger of a range than villain here. And I think people lose track of that a lot.
That's really good. That's really good to note. That's really good to note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people get way too passive out of position in spots like that. And then by contrast, like they play too aggro in position because they don't recognize like, oh, that's a really good card for villain's range. You no longer have a strong enough range to justify like playing super aggro here, you know? So there's a lot back and forth in that.
That's
in
a
that
great
area.
point. That's a great point.
Thank you. So, turn spot. We range bet the flop. 4 of diamonds turn. What do you make of this turn card?
Kind of a brick of sure our opponent can have some backdoor diamonds, but so can we. So I think it's on. We're still at top of range here, and I think we would love to continue getting money in.
Yeah, I think that that's completely right. I think the interesting thing about spots like this is people are very inclined, I think, to. There's a weird thing that goes on where people jump straight to thinking about draws.
Right.
Like they immediately, the first thing is like, oh shit, there's a draw out there, right? And I think it's more productive or more useful to basically always just start at the top and work your way down.
Right. Like that's going to take up a small portion of their range, but not a major portion.
Yeah. And so, and in particular, it's also like if you add more and more draws to your opponent's range, it actually isn't going to affect the strategies that much because if you think about it, let's say your opponent's range has 50% equity to begin with. If you add more and more hands that have 50% equity to that range, the equity stays the same. But if you add weak hands or you add strong hands, the equity goes down or up, right? So what actually matters is how many weak hands do they have and how many strong hands do they have, not how many middle hands. Because if you add more middle hands, it's just more middle, you know, it's like the middle stays the same.
Right.
So it might decrease the frequency of the good and bad hands, but it's not going to change the equity that much. So it's true that this board, this turn card brings some draws out there, but it also doesn't really bring any value. Villain is not really calling 4s on the flop very often. They obviously never have 10-4, 9-4, or deuce-4, so it doesn't really change any of the value hands. I think for that reason, you know, we're very comfortable here with a lot of portions of our range. Do we feel like, actually, let me throw it to you. Do you have a clear sense of what sizing you feel like is the size you would want to go with range-wise here?
So I think this is where I was like making some mistakes. I think, like our range can kind of, maybe this is wrong, but my initial thought was our range can start polarizing here, like, I mean, or just go bigger in general. So I guess like I was like 60% plus. I don't think we want to go like too small, like catch all sizing or.
Okay, well, consider the SPR though, right? If we bet 60%, What's going to be left on river?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, wait. We got 43 bigs behind here.
Yeah,
It's,
we're at an
yeah,
SPR
it's hard
of
to
like
see.
1.2. Yeah.
So then we're not in a situation where we're like super deep stacked here to where in order to get stacks in we have to go bigger. So then I would say more like 30 to 40% pot then maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we really have two options. I think the way I always look at these spots is that we don't really ever want to bet more than a 2E size, a 2-street geometric size without being all in. So.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very small circumstances where we can, but for the most part, I think here we basically have the option of check, 26, 43, or all in. I don't think we can ever use the 75 because it's kind of insane to bet 26 with 43 behind and then just be like 1/7 pot behind on the river, you know.
Jam river.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. We're not really going to do that. So I think it really becomes: do we bet the 43 or do we shove? And a lot of the time, the answer there is going to come down to which of those sizings do we think our opponent is going to have a tougher time against, right? Which of those is going to give our opponent the tougher decisions? So what would you say there between the 43 and the all-in? What do you think puts them in the toughest spots there?
Gosh, that's so hard to say because I was going to say I think that they would maybe make more mistakes folding to an all-in and not calling off versus making more calling I don't even know if they're mistakes, but maybe going the 43% and getting so many worse hands to continue and them not really wanting to quote unquote give up yet, you know, because they might think they're getting a good price.
Yeah, I think that I think someone had a question here. Someone asked about 2E. I'm not sure if you're asking about what 2E is. 2E just means a geometric size, so a size that allows you to be all in across 2 remaining streets with the same bet size. So 2E stands for 2 equal bets. So in this case, it would be 43% on turn and 43% all in on the river. That's what it means. So someone said, Big Gamble says, would we play Queen Jack Ace 5 the same way here? Yeah, I mean, we certainly would have plenty of bluffs here. In particular, I think this is an interesting turn card because of that, in that if we consider those 2 sizings, the way that we want to think about our opponent making mistakes is we want to look at which of these sizings gives them the toughest decisions. And I think it's close because if you think about the 43, a 10 has an easy call, a flush draw has an easy call, any kind of combo draw, most of their open-enders, a lot of their hands here have a relatively straightforward continue against that size. And a lot of the stuff that just like missed and, you know, doesn't have much equity, or stuff like pocket sixes or something, that just folds.
Right.
If we shove, a big portion of their range now has quite a tricky spot.
Yeah.
A weakish 10 is not in a great spot. Diamonds kind of hate it. Even combo draws like King Jack of diamonds or something, they don't love being shoved on here. So I think there's a pretty decent argument for shoving, particularly because we have a lot of hands like King Queen of diamonds ourselves that they specifically don't really like betting the 43% because if they bet that size and then get shoved on, they can't fold, but they also don't really like having to call off anyway. So I kind of like the jam size here, honestly.
Yeah, I think that it does put them in a lot of tough spots, and yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. So with that said, let's hit the jam button. Oh, solver doesn't like it. Okay, well, I got wrecked by the solver, but it does happen. Let's see what solver likes. Okay, so it is using the jam sometimes. But it does prefer the 43. Okay, so let's see what I was actually wrong about in terms of the ranges.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, we could be wrong, quote unquote, with what the solver wants to do, but in game against the population, like the other option might be way better. Yeah. So.
Oh, okay. So here's where I was wrong. I thought that villain would have an easy fold to the jam with like a 9. But it turns out a 9 is supposed to always call. Like this is the thing about low SPRs. Like they're getting almost 2-to-1 against the jam, and a 9 is like just has to call, right? A 9 has, how much equity does it have? Ace 9 has 48% equity, 38% equity depending on which combo it is. So those ace 9s have to call. Some of their like king queen stuff is maybe folding. But yeah, it looks like really with the 43%, that's what actually puts them in awkward spots with like king queen with no diamond, or king queen that doesn't have the flush draw is kind of in a weird spot. King jack without diamonds has to fold. Pocket sevens is close, sixes is close. So I guess I was right about sixes at least. So it looks like, yeah, 43 is just a little bit better there, the geo size. And then when they call, let's put a river up there. Let's put like a 5 up there, random brick. And now, yeah, pretty straightforward. After we go geometric on the turn and then the river comes a brick, we're just going to play jam or check in almost every case. And you can see that overpairs other than aces are basically jamming. Aces is kind of protecting our checks here. Aces is like checking to check call.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that seems pretty logical. You know what? I did not look up ace king on the previous board, and I really want to see if I was right. So
let's see. I think we had another question from Fast Roll
someone had a
Poker.
question?
Think jam, we start missing a lot of value versus worse 10x, 9x, and let their draws off the hook at some frequency.
Yeah, I mean, letting draws off the hook is not really a concern because draws have equity, right? What we care about is like the stuff that we're actually way ahead of with our value. And if they do start to fold a 10, then yeah, the jam becomes a lot worse. But you know, we saw from the sim just there that a 10 is not even close to folding against a jam.
Yeah, so nor should it ever in that spot.
Right. Like if they do fold a 10, we should just like egregiously
jam
bluff
everything
as a shove. Yeah, just like jam range, because if they're folding a 10, they're just like ridiculously over folding. So that's kind of an interesting one. Let's look back at the, yeah, here it is. Okay, was I right about the ace king of spades? Okay, do me a deal, guys. If I was right about the ace king of spades, you all have to sign up for the alliance. That's the deal. Every single one of you. Okay, it's mixing. All right, so I wasn't like completely wrong. It's like checking some. But actually, I think it's because this is such a good board, such a better board for us than we thought. Ace king of hearts is mixing checks. Like all the ace kings are mixing checks. Ace king of spades is favoring more bets. So I don't think, I guess I wasn't quite right, but I think the principle here is going to hold true in a lot of situations. It just becomes, let's say we were to, if I solve this with AI and I force us to use only the 77% size, that is probably going to, let's just do this. Let's delete the other bet sizes. So we're only allowed to use the 77. Now let's see if it does what I expected it with ace king. It's mostly checking the ace kings, but it is betting ace king of spades a bit more often. Okay, so I wasn't completely right. I think it's going to be maybe more applicable in position, that logic here. But you can see like ace jack, ace queen of spades is still checking a decent chunk. Ace jack is checking a little bit. Ace seven of spades is the combo that's really checking the most here because it has a pair. So that's the nut flush combo that we're checking the most here. So, okay, so I wasn't that far off, but I wasn't exactly right either. All right, well, we'll leave it there. That's cool.
Cool.
So I think that's about enough. I think we're both going to get pretty tired soon, so we can probably wrap it up there.
All right. Cool. Well, cool. I put the link in the chat on all the chats, I think. So
thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
If y'all want to join, use my code PokerFaceAsh for 30% off. And yeah, it's gonna be a fun summer. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's really gonna help a lot. And
I'm excited.
Yeah. Thanks for all the insight. I know everyone really appreciated it today. So awesome content. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we can do this again sometime, and we'll figure out a way to make the logistics a bit easier.
Yeah, I think we can tweak it in a way where it'll be pretty functional. So
sounds good.
All right, well, I'm gonna end the live real quick.
I guess we'll hop off the live.
All right, thanks guys.